It is a joy to be with you this morning. My name is Reverend Katie Sexton-Wood. Katie, I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And I am so grateful for the invitation to be with you all today. I serve as Executive Director of the Arizona Faith Network. I am ordained in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. That's a lot of words to say progressive Christian. Is the reality of it. Brothers and sisters to United Church of Christ, which is just a little bit bigger here in Arizona. Grateful to Reverend Dance for the invitation, for Shuru, Vasu, Bandhu, and myself to be here today. I also bring greetings to you from Reverend Susan Frederick Gray and Reverend Brian Frederick Gray from Boston, and Henry, who I had the joy of counseling in Disciples Church Camp. Brian was my seminary mentor, so I spent a lot of time around their family and shot them a picture of you all just a few minutes ago. So they send lots of love from Boston. Today I'm going to share a quick teaching from my faith tradition around listening time and the upcoming election. So this teaching comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, 21 through 34. After Jesus crossed over by boat, a large crowd met him at the seaside. One of the meeting place leaders named Jairus came. When he saw Jesus, he fell to his knees beside himself as he begged, saying, "My dear daughter is at death's door. Come and lay hands on her so she will get well and live." Jesus went with him, and the whole crowd tagged along, pushing him as he walked. In the midst of this, a woman who had suffered a condition of hemorrhaging for 12 years. After a long succession of physicians had treated her badly, taking all her money and leaving her worse off than before, had heard Jesus was in town. She slipped into this crowd and slipped behind him and touched his robe. She was thinking to herself, "If I can put just a finger on his robe, I will be healed." The moment she did it, the flow of blood dried up. She could feel the change and knew her sickness was over and done with. At the same moment, Jesus felt the energy discharging from him, and he turned to the crowd and said, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said, "What are you talking about? With this crowd pushing around you, why are you asking this?" And he said, "Who touched my robe? Dozens have touched you," they said. But he went on asking and looking around to see who had done it. The woman, knowing what had happened, knowing she was the one, stepped up in fear, trembling, and knelt before him and told Jesus the whole story. He replied to her, "Daughter, you took a risk of faith, and now you're healed and whole. Live well, live blessed, be healed." So a wise scholar once asked his students, "What would you do if every day for the rest of your life you woke up and you had $86,400 deposited into your bank account?" $86,400 every day for the rest of the life. But the trick is, if you didn't spend every cent every day, you would lose what was left over. He walked around the classroom and he asked his students again and said, "What would you do if you got this money every day?" And they thought this was a trick question, so they remained silent for a minute. He kept walking and walking, and he said, "Okay, again, what would you do if every day you had $86,400 deposited to your bank account?" Slowly, the students started shouting out answers, some of them funny, like, "I'd buy a lot of coffee," or "I'd buy a fleet of sports cars," or "I would spend every day at Disneyland. It might cost that there now." Others responded with charitable answers like, I'd feed the hungry, or I'd donate to nonprofits, or I'd travel the world to help others. Many were realistic and they said, I'd pay off my debt. Maybe I actually get a crack at those student loans we have, or I'd buy a house, and then another house, and then another house. The silly answers kept going on for a while in the classroom until someone shouted out with a serious voice and he said, well, I would like to buy more time. There it is, the professor said. And his expression turned serious. He said, that's it, time. Every day, each one of us has a bank. When we wake up, that is credited 86,400 seconds, 1,440 minutes, 24 hours. That's our bank. If we don't use it, we lose it. And so the scholar turned to his students and said, so you get this 86,400 seconds every day. What are you doing with them? You see, he said, we have our days, our rushed behaviors, our anxious behaviors, down to a science, right? We live in this world that is go, 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 and so often when we're moving from one thing to the next, we miss what's right in front of us. How we spend our time matters. She had the movements down to a science. She had been practicing them day in and day out for 12 years. She gathered up her clothes as tight as she could. She shuffled her feet, moving as quick as possible. She kept her mouth closed so she wouldn't be heard or yelled at as she navigated between person to person trying to get to him. These people were moving quickly. They were always moving quickly, always rushing from place to place. And so they didn't see her in that moment. But she still knew she had to move carefully because she couldn't even touch them. Her movements were precise, perfected, particular, just so she didn't bother anyone around her with her presence. You see, for 12 years, she had been bleeding. For 12 years, society had told her a story that she was unclean. For 12 years, she had been cast out, pushed aside, told to stay away, and so she learned to move in a way where she wouldn't have to be seen, where no one would shame her. So she didn't touch anyone because she didn't want to take up their time or waste their time. I imagine that's what she learned in those 12 years. Those 4,380 days, 105,120 hours, those minutes, those seconds that are just too high to count. I imagine that's when she learned to just stay away from people. I imagine in the silence, in the eyes that avoided seeing her, in the dark of night where she hid, that's when her story was confirmed for her. That she was unwanted, unworthy, unclean, and no matter what she did, she was not someone who belonged. This was a story that was told to her over and over again, that people didn't have time for her, time to hear her story, time to help her be healed, time to even tell her she mattered, to even notice her. And so she lived in this one story for 12 years. This single story. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie told a TED Talk. You may have heard it before, right? The danger of a single story. Has anyone ever heard it? If you haven't, I suggest go home and watch it. She talks about her childhood when she's giving the story and how she used to read these books that were beautiful, but they were of this white, blue-eyed princess who was trying to go to sleep or wake up from sleep and she just couldn't. She would read these stories that were full of characters that she aspired to be, but later in life she realized they were all English-based, as she lived in Africa. They were white and blue-eyed, and she wondered why she didn't look like the people in those stories. The ones that played in the snow and ate apples. The ones that talked about the weather and how lovely it was. She wondered why God made her so different. Why these white people with blue eyes had food and her people never did. And so she talked about how she grew up in this story, this single story of the people and characters in the books had, and that's what she was supposed to be, and that's what she thought her life was supposed to be, until she realized she was only looking at life through this story that was given to her of English people. Not her story, not her people, not her culture. She said, this is what's dangerous about living in a single story. I always felt it was impossible to engage properly with a person or place without engaging with all of them, all of the stories that made them that person. And so the consequence of living in one story is this: it robs people of dignity. It robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. It emphasizes how we are different rather than similar. When you only have the time to live in one story, when you define groups of people as bad, groups of ways to believe as wrong, you are living in a single story, an echo chamber, and you are robbing others of their story, of their dignity. You are not taking the time to hear. Those 86,400 seconds, 1,440 minutes, those 24 hours we get each day, how we spend our time tells a story of what matters to us. Think about that for a minute. How have you been spending your time lately? Worrying? Anyone? Doing emails? Anyone? Cleaning out that inbox? Watching TV? Y'all are being shy. Shopping? Drinking coffee? Come on. All right, thank you. How about, have you spent your time being overwhelmed by campaign ads? Yes, I hear that. The latest report says that right now there are 4.3 million political ads running in the United States. 4.3 million. And do you know where is the top market for political ads right now? Arizona. We have the highest number of ads running, and that means if we even have radio or TV or social media on, we have so much of our time, even unconsciously, being spent absorbing these messages right now that are overwhelming us. The top political ad message happening right now is around public safety, with the top message being that crime is on the rise, specifically around the border. Immigration is on the rise is what we're hearing, so we need protection from those folks that are coming across that border. Anyone hear that ad so far? I heard it 3 times this morning on the way over here. This is a story that dehumanizes one another. A story that makes us other another. A story that makes us not believe or know another's truth. This is the single story we were talking about. If we are hearing over and over and over again that fellow human beings who we believe are sacred and made from God's image are violent and illegal and wrong and coming for us in our homes, we are living in a story that is not of our faith. This is a single story, one story. And so we know we've got to vote, right? We got to get out the vote. We know that we need to show up. We know that we want certain candidates to win and others not to win. And we're hoping and praying and protecting and marching and speaking and preaching. However, the power of community and the power of story will always be more important and will always be stronger than whoever is in office. The people that are elected may be louder than the community sometimes. They may have more money to buy those ads, but the reality is the real power rests with each of us. I want you to turn to someone right now and say, you are powerful. You can make a difference. It is our stories, one another, that matter. We will refuse to live in a single story, and despite how election goes, we will keep peace and be peacemakers. That does not mean to sit in silence only, but to make the way, the hard way for peace out there, because we will take the time, those 86,400 seconds, and remember what Jesus did that day. The disciples were rushing him. They were afraid. They were not going to get him to save this important man's daughter. You see, he was an elected official, and so they prioritized him first. They said, we have to go and save his daughter before anyone else. And so they were pushing him and keeping the crowd away from him. But despite it all, this woman persisted. She continued her movements, the weaving in and out of the crowd, and eventually she got to him and touched his robe. Jesus stopped, and the disciples were like, Jesus, we gotta go. There's this chaos. We're hearing this message of we gotta go be with this politician, this big voice in this community, and we need to save his daughter. This is what's important. If you want to be powerful, you need to be paying attention to being with those who are at the top. We gotta go, Jesus. But Jesus said no. He stopped, even though he was rushed. He stopped, even though he knew there were a million things to do that day. He stopped and he turned to someone who had been ignored by everyone else. He turned to someone who all of the community said was unworthy. He turned and he said, daughter, your faith has made you well. Daughter, he said to this rejected woman. Daughter to the one they claimed unclean. Daughter to the one who'd been thrown away and told she was nothing. Daughter to the one the world said no one had time or value for. He said, daughter, go and be healed. I pray today that we will look at how we will be spending our time these next few days, those 86,400 seconds. Will we choose to listen to the messages of hate, of anxiety, or worry? Or will we take the time to be in community with those who are unloved, been told they are unworthy, and sit together as we bring about a new way of being?
Thank you so much, Reverend Katie. How a beautiful teachings from Jesus. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, each of you, for being here today, for having this opportunity to be together, to have a time to practice peace together. I invite you to take some time to close your eyes, to breathe mindful, to reflect on the teachings of Jesus, that we use here to appreciate that. And when you are ready, slowly open your eyes to come back with the group. We have a beautiful time together today, a time to reflect on the peace, to reflect on what we are living right now during elections. With this beautiful music that we are hearing, we are practicing mindful breathing with peace and with love. I'm Vasu Bandhu, I'm from the Buddhist community, and I also serve as the Faith Community Coordinator for Arizona Faith Network, helping and serving each of you, each of the faith communities here in Arizona. And I'm very honored to working with Reverend Katie and with many other people of different religions. Our interconnection we can see in each time that we are living. Today will not be possible to have this meeting without the interconnections that we have, that we need from each other, that we have a specific beauty and unique skills, each of us. This is what I want to share with you today about the teachings of Buddha in our interconnections. Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, Buddha Sakyamuni, was a person which tried to learn about the suffering. He discovered that each person and each being suffer, and the suffering is something that we share in common. And because of that, we can be mindful that each being want to live in happiness and want to don't have that suffering. With that teaching of Buddha Gautama, we can be mindful of what we do with others, how we act, how is our relationship with others. During this election time, it's a difficult time because we are living with polarization when there is ideas that are completely the opposite, when there is positions that take us far away from each other. In my family, we are very diverse. My husband practices Islam. He is Muslim. And I learning all the time to living in a interfaith family. Also, in the extended family, we have different points of view in politics, in social things. But the thing that unites us is the love. I know that in our families we can find very diverse points of view, and we can find that sometimes we can feel opposite. We oppose and we think completely different. But when we recognize the love that united all the beings, we can working to living in harmony. The Buddha Gautama Siddhartha mentioned in the Sutta Pitaka that the teachings of metta. Metta is a concept that means loving kindness. And loving kindness is the opportunity and the effort that each of us put to love other beings, to develop love. The most difficult thing sometimes when we need to love somebody is when that person is opposite of us or is completely different of us. And this is something that for me is very important in the teachings of Buddha, in how I need to make an effort to live, to love somebody that I'm not agreed with. That's very difficult. But with the practice of meditation, the practice of mindful breathing, we can appreciate the diversity. In the diverse religions and expressions of faith, we have teachings about the importance of the dignity of each person and the importance to love others. In the Hindu Upanishad, the Hindu teachings remind us that the guest is the representative of God. The Torah tells us that the stranger is something that we need to love. In the Christian Bible, Jesus commands us to welcome the strange. The Holy Quran directs us to be good with our neighbors. Guru Nanak in Sikhism, the founder of Sikhism, ensured that all individuals are treated with the same, reflect the beauty of the diversity. And Sikhism teaches us that the light of God is in everyone, which make us equal. In the Baha'i faith, Abdu'l-Baha, the son and successor of Baha'u'llah, said that we need to be always kind with everyone and a refugee for those who are without shelter. And in Buddhism, Buddha Gautama tells us that the hatred cannot be dismissed and combated with more hatred, just with love. In my faith, I always appreciate the diversity because the diversity is a richness for our society. Each part of the diversity helps us to understand that we are interconnectedness and that we depend from each other. We cannot exist just because we are. We exist because we depend of other people. We depend of other living beings. Buddha Gautama teaches us that interdependence is something that also makes us vulnerable and makes us thinking that we need to respect and to live in harmony with every single diversity. In the Dhammapada, part of the Tripitaka or Tipitaka, the canon of scriptures of the Buddha, Buddha Gautama teaches us that as the bee take from the flower without harming the flower and just fly away, we need to be in this life without harming each other, instead to learning how we can live in harmony. And we have diverse religions who teaches us different practices and rituals to living in harmony and living with peace with each other. During this time of the elections, I invited you to take some time to read it, to take some time to make an effort to try to understand somebody that think different than you, somebody that don't agree with your beliefs. And just making an effort, we as society, we will be possible to living in harmony, to living in peace. My invitation today is that we together creating peace in our interconnection and interdependence. Thank you so much again for having us, and thank you so much for everything you do, for the effort that you do to being here, to practice peace, to learning, and to living together in harmony. Thank you, and as we say in Buddhism, Amitofo.